Well, it looks like a mix of a bye week and the return of Dylan Edwards is exactly the spark Kansas State needed.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. We're going to discuss Chris Klieman's post-game press conference today. We're going to dig into some of the top performers according to Pro Football Focus on both the offense and defensive side. And then we're going to give our thoughts as we head into Baylor week as the team will travel into Waco. Lots of good stuff to discuss on this episode. We have a lot of good stuff coming up on the channel, so be sure to hit subscribe, like, leave some comments, join the conversation, all that good stuff, bringing you Wildcat coverage like no one else right here on Locked On Kansas State, your team every day. Well, Chris Klieman talked to the media right after the game on Saturday, and you could tell the energy was there. It was huge, and it was exciting, and it was a lot of good feelings because they should have had those good feelings. They won the football game 34-20. There was a lot of great things to take from this football game, and arguably it was the best football game they played all season. I think that's a fair assessment for sure. When you're talking about your only other win came against FCS North Dakota and you needed the last minute drive to make that happen. There was a lot of good feelings about this team feeling like it was the team you expected them to be all offseason. And what was it that made that happen? Was it a spark? Well, that's what Chris Klieman said. Now, for the record, it was also his birthday on Saturday. Did not know that. I did not have that on my calendar. Things are going to change for that one, but he got a win on his birthday. Really cool thing here. Overall, though, what I'm taking it from this was that the energy was absolutely contagious. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But the game changers in here that brought a spark, of course, was having the bye week and the return of Dylan Edwards. Coach Klieman said he is the spark we needed, and it changes how he's on the field. When Dylan's on the field, we play different football. We play absolutely better football with Dylan Edwards on the field. And it's very, very safe to say that is a true statement. A different team Kansas State is when Dylan plays. He had a 75-yard touchdown to showcase everything that he did. We saw him rush for just under what he rushed for in the Rape Bowl game. He played some fantastic football in his return. And it was probably hard for UCF to scout and figure out what they were going to do to stop and contain Dylan Edwards, because really all you had on tape with him was the Rape Bowl game where you still had Connor Riley as the offensive coordinator. Matt Wells, I think, had the best game as the offensive coordinator for Kansas State so far this season. I think that's a fair assessment for sure. His presence for Dylan Edwards stressed defensive coordinators, widened the field. Coach Klieman said it felt like the field was 60 yards wide with Dylan Edwards on there. It's a really good feeling having him back. And it definitely makes you wonder, and of course we can't change the outcome of games in the past, but it makes you wonder that if he was around for the entirety of the Iowa State game, for that game against Army and that game against Arizona, if that record would look a lot different. It doesn't really matter, though, because you're still 1-1 in the Big 12 conference, and that conference is wide open. We'll talk about that in just a second. Avery Johnson took a nice step forward, too, talking about adding spark to the offense. Dylan Edwards wasn't the only one that added spark to this offense. Avery Johnson, the way he utilized his legs was so impressive. And he took what the defense gave him, whether it was a deep shot threat to wide receivers or running and scrambling with the football. Chris Klieman said because of some of the injuries to his wide receivers, including Jared Bradley and the surprise of Jace Brown, who only played in the first play of the game, they asked Avery Johnson to run the football more. And we kind of had an idea that was going to happen because of the narrative we heard with Matt Wells filling in for Chris Klieman on his radio show during the bye week, and then with the press conferences from Chris Klieman and the coordinators heading into the week, that they were stressing the fact that they wanted to see Avery Johnson run with his legs. So there was a clear message being sent to Kansas State's star quarterback, and I think he lived up to the hype. I think he put himself back into the category of being the caliber type player that you can be as a Heisman Trophy candidate player. I'm not saying he's there because of how the beginning of the season happened, but the caliber of type of player that Avery Johnson is, I think that proved that on Saturday. And if you can get that same type of Avery Johnson for the rest of the season, this team is going to find themselves in contention for the Big 12 championship game. I mean that, full stop. If you get the Avery Johnson that you got on Saturday, add in that Dylan Edwards that you got on Saturday as well, those explosiveness as well, even with the defensive kind of woes we had at some point in the moment, we're going to talk about that because there's still a lot of work to do with this team. If you get those two doing exactly what they did on Saturday, this team will contend for a Big 12 title, regardless of how the season started. That's a great feeling to be at right now. As we end September here, 2-3 on the season, but 1-1 in Big 12 play, the season's wide open. Absolutely there. Did we probably go a little too far? Did we probably overreact? Absolutely. Big game in Baylor should change that if Kansas State can capitalize this coming Saturday. Lots of good things from the offensive line as well. Mentioned Devin Vass. Chris Klieman did on the postgame. I talked about Devin Vass as well on the Instant Reaction show. I thought he had some fantastic blocks, especially on that 75-yard run that Dylan Edwards ran right through his gap to get through and score that touchdown and really kind of highlight the fact of he's back. I thought he did an excellent job popping in there. Chris Klieman reminded everybody that he's a 4-year guy inside the program, really stepped up, did some good things. Mentioned Gus Hawkins and Andrew Linegang as well for their strong run blocking effort. So gotta love that because we're normally not talking in the good graces of the offensive line. He did also note that Edwards kind of helps make things right on that offensive line when they're not perfect because of the type of dynamic player he is. I kind of stressed that as well this past week, saying having Dylan Edwards back in the lineup gives him the opportunity, gives those offensive linemen the opportunity to make less mistakes because Dylan Edwards gets past that line of scrimmage so fast. You don't have the opportunities to make the mistakes. You don't have to hold your blocks for as long. So having him back is a huge, huge win for Kansas State. You started to see the train move against Arizona. The train is in full motion now. And hopefully it can continue when we get to Waco on Saturday. The wide receiver crisis, though, that is something that we're going to have to pay attention to. Jace Brown was ruled out after warm-ups. I thought I saw him play one play. We did see a report that he was played one play and then hobbled off, so he didn't have a chance to go. Not sure on the injury. Hopefully maybe we'll hear more from Chris Klieman about that on his presser today, and then we'll have you covered here on tomorrow's episode. Also mentioned, of course, Jared Bradley's been out for a couple weeks now. Hopefully they have him back soon. Adonis Moyes and Bryce Nernberg were injured early, so the receiver group came down to just Tibbs, Sterling Lockett, Caleb Medford, and Cook. So there was a lot of Isaac Cook. So there was a lot of depth, a lot of next man up kind of possibilities for that wide receiver group, and they found a way to make it happen. Now, Chris Klieman did mention that they went to a bigger personnel towards the end of the game. Maybe that's why it felt like it was a conservative type of offensive play calling because they were limited and what they could call because they were going with a bigger lineup. They brought more tight ends into it to grind out those drives towards the end of the football game. Maybe that's why it felt that way. Either way, they got the job done and they got the win. It's a huge, good win for Kansas State, and it deserves to be applauded. It deserves to be rewarded, and Chris Klieman made sure that was the case in the overall feeling for his post-game presser when he was speaking to the media. He was quick. He didn't want to talk very long. I think he talked for just under 11 minutes. And right when he left, he said, "I'm out of here, guys. I'm going to go celebrate this win." And for good reason, because this team has been through so much this season already, only 5 games in, only the end of September, and they have a huge rest of their schedule to focus on, including this Saturday in Waco against the Baylor Bears. Let's talk defense. Let's talk defense on the next turnaround here, and we'll talk about energy reset, culture, and what the fans did at Bill Snyder Family Stadium. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, we got to talk about 5-Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy shot delivers tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of premium 12-ounce cups of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with zero sugar and zero crashes. What I love most about 5-Hour Energy is how portable they are. Put them in your pocket, and that energy, whenever you need it, is ready to go. You can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it. I go with grape. However, with these new bold flavors, I might have to try something new, but grape has always been my go-to since I've used 5-Hour Energy for quite some time. So enough with the boring flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get your flavors you love, like grape, and be bold, or try something new in store and online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. We're talking the post-game presser from Chris Klieman on Saturday on today's episode of Locked On Kansas State. Really appreciate you joining and stopping around. Please hit subscribe. Please join the conversation. Leave your comment below. What was your favorite play or favorite moment from the game on Saturday? We should celebrate the win as well, because they haven't come too often so far this season. Hopefully that's about to change. The Baylor Bears come. We'll be heading to Waco, take on the Baylor Bears on Saturday. But until then, we still have a lot to cover, and we will be breaking it down on this channel, Locked On Kansas State. So subscribe wherever you're listening, either on audio or on YouTube. The defense was fantastic for the most part. I think the defense really stepped up, and they really showed, and what Chris Klieman said, they found a way to fight back even when they were getting punched in the mouth late in this one. The biggest thing that I took from all the defensive conversations was how he praised the secondary, and especially what he said about Quay Moss. The interception that he had that should have been on SC Top 10. I'm not even sure if it was. If it wasn't, then shame on ESPN. But the interception that he had, Coach Klieman called it a, quote, Jacob Parrish type interception, and a huge momentum swing for Kansas State. That is high praise. Absolute high praise. Talking about Jacob Parrish, now cornerback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, NFL draft pick this past April, and the huge shoes to fill in the Kansas State secondary. One of the reasons why a guy like Quay Moss was brought over in the transfer portal. Now, I know he normally plays safety, but still, the point is that he is getting compared to a very great Kansas State player that played with them last season and now is in the NFL. And we're talking about that after a defense was gassed and beat by an Army team a few weeks ago, was beat by an Arizona team the week before this game, and then now we get to have this conversation after defeating an undefeated UCF team. It's not like they beat 0-4 or 0-3 UCF. They beat 3-0 UCF. They handed the Knights, with Scott Frost returning to Orlando, their first loss in his second tenure. And that defense is a big reason behind that. You can talk about the energy and the spark you needed from Avery Johnson and from Dylan Edwards. You absolutely needed that. You needed your offensive line to step up, but if that means nothing if your defense continues to be gassed and struggles. And that did not happen for the most part in this one. They let up a lot of big plays. There was still some things to do, and Coach Klieman made sure that we were aware that there's still a lot to do on this team and still a lot to get better. But heading into Monday, I think you're going to have another positive feeling from Chris Klieman when he talks about this team and highlighting how the energy is still there with this roster. The Big 12 grind is something. And I mentioned that I think that UCF could be seen as the easiest game left on the schedule. Maybe that Oklahoma State or that Colorado game might be it, but who knows when it comes later on in the schedule. If that's the case, then you're about to go into a gauntlet. And I think we already knew that heading into the offseason and then getting into the season before this slow start for Kansas State. I think we already knew that we were about to go into a gauntlet. This Baylor game that's about to happen on Saturday, I thought this was a game that was set for prime time, was set for potentially a college football game day. But instead, we're going to get it an 11 o'clock Central matchup on ESPN+. Don't like the ESPN Plus side. Like, to me, that screams putting the game on mute, if I'm being completely honest. But I do love the early games. I'm not going to lie to you, folks. I truly enjoyed the fact that we got to watch a 2-score defeat for Kansas State taking down UCF. The game was over at 2:30 Central Time We were live, we recorded, I got the show up, and then I got the kickback with a couple frosty beverages and watch football for the rest of the day. Would love to do that again. Would love to have an encore performance of that this Saturday after taking down the Baylor Bears. Really enjoyed what we saw from the defense here. The defensive line brought pressure, but, quote, Chris Klieman said, needs to finish tackles and sacks. We need more from that. There was a couple missed tackles in this one. We'll talk about that when we get the PFF scores here in a minute. Secondary thought, but gave up some explosive plays. The biggest thing you can talk about was that 82-yard reception that Wesley Fair gave up on that touchdown pass. And it was just a bad angle from Wesley Fair. I think that's an easy coachable conversation. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. It's just one of those mistakes where I don't think it's going to take a lot of adjustments to make happen. I think you can probably call it a bonehead move. You can't have them happen. But when they go back and watch the tape, which I'm sure they already have this weekend, I'm sure that's going to be an easy adjustment moving forward. The energy reset has been huge, and you can feel it. It's contagious. And I was questioning if it's just going to be coach talk, lip service. I mentioned that during the week last week, like how much of this is actually just talk? Can they walk the walk? And I think they shut me up. I think they told me exactly what I needed to see because they really stepped up in this one, and the energy was contagious. The sidelines were great, and Chris Klieman talked about how they stressed celebration at practice. They had a sideline warning during the game. Chris Klieman said he didn't care. He wanted to make sure that you're celebrating Kansas State, good performances. And he mentioned something about they probably had 30 sideline warnings during the week during practice because they emphasized making sure they had that energy. It was contagious. It brought more performance and more energy on the field, and I hope they continue that the rest of the season. Because not only did you get that from the performance and the play, but it kind of brought more energy to the fans as well. And speaking of the fans, they had a huge turnout. It was seen as the 12th best turnout in Bill Snyder Family Stadium ever in the history of the stadium. Amazing stuff from the Kansas State fans. And you're a 1-3 team. And Chris Klieman made sure he emphasized this. He said, thanks for filling in. He really wanted to shout out the fans. He said, you're a 1-3 team. You believe in the kids, and thank you for showing up. You could have decided to stay home and watch this football game, but instead you showed up to watch this game and showed that you still care about this program. It's a good feeling. It's a nice feeling to know that it's not just the negative, small few people that you see on social media, especially like Twitter X, talk about this team. It's 50,000 strong that really still support this football team. And it's a great feeling to have, knowing that I get to cover it every single day right here. The injury report looks a little bleak, though. And we mentioned already with Jace Brown and Jared Bradley, we'll hopefully get them back. He doesn't know if they're going to be back ready to go for Baylor. We'll get more updates on that soon, hopefully this week, whether it's from Chris Klieman or maybe Matt Wells when it comes to the coordinator conversation at the end of the week. But it sounds like just from the initial thoughts, initial conversation with Chris Klieman, that he doesn't seem too hopeful that either Jace Brown or Jared Bradley will be ready to go against Baylor, which will be a huge hit if that's the case. To finish up what Chris Klieman said, just a couple other thoughts. He praised Scott Frost and UCF for playing through the tragedy of losing their offensive line coach. Yeah, that definitely probably was a big deal. Well, why they weren't completely 100%. The energy for UCF wasn't always there compared to some of the games we saw, like when they played the Tar Heels. He did reiterate that they needed to finish tackles and sacks as a next step improvement. I'm guessing that's going to be the priority of Joe Klarman and his defense heading into Baylor this week, because they have to find a way to pressure Baylor's quarterback, Sawyer Robinson. He has been absolutely incredible so far this season. And then he did sign off joking he's going to go celebrate his birthday and celebrate the win. But all joking aside, he deserved it. And so did this rest of this coaching staff. So did the players. After the amount of criticism, myself included, that this coaching staff and these players have got over the beginning of the season, they did a good job kind of silencing that, at least for this week, heading into the game in Waco. Speaking of that game in Waco, before we get on and talk about the top performers in UCF, I just wanted to give a quick little preview of that. Again, that game's going to be at 11 o'clock Central Time, ESPN Plus, 2-3 Kansas State taking on 3-2 Baylor Bears. But the biggest point of this, Each team is 1-1 in the Big 12 conference. This is a huge game for that. According to ESPN Analytics, to start this one off on a Monday morning, Baylor is seen as a 61% in favor to win this one, to 39% for Kansas State. Take that what you will. Sawyer Robertson has been fantastic. Sawyer Robertson, I should make sure I say it correctly. He's thrown for 1,700 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions on the season in his 5 games so far. Putting that into comparison to Avery Johnson, Avery Johnson's only thrown for just over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and interceptions. So 9 more touchdowns, 700 more yards. Yes, 2 more interceptions, but they are a very pass-heavy team. A perfect time for that secondary to get right like they did against UCF. Just can't have any of those boneheaded 80-yard plays, because they're going to be tested multiple times in that game on Saturday. They're not afraid to run the ball either. They're a pretty balanced team, but they put up a lot of yardage on offense. They're just coming off a win against Oklahoma State this past weekend. Now, this is the first time that Oklahoma State played a football game in near 20 years without Mike Gundy as their head coach. Baylor did beat the Cowboys 45-27. It was close for a little bit, though. Baylor did run away with it towards the end, but I will say it was close. Oklahoma State hung around, but that is normally what happens when teams like this and with new interim coaches, they bring this new energy to their roster. I don't think you should look too hard into that if you're scouting the Baylor Bears. Their only losses on the season are to an SEC team in the Auburn Tigers at the beginning of the season, 38-24, and then they lost by a field goal to the defending Big 12 champions, Arizona State Sun Devils. They got wins against SMU 48-45 in double overtime, Samford 42-7, and as I mentioned, Oklahoma State this past Saturday. Lots of stuff to pay attention to Baylor. We're going to dive deep into it. Maybe we'll have a crossover with Cam Stewart for Locked On Baylor as well, and we're going to make sure that you are fully prepared to cheer on the Kansas State Wildcats this coming Saturday in Waco. All right, let's dive into what we thought about these top performers. We're going to use Pro Football Focus, and we're going to discuss the top performers on both the offense and defensive side as we close up UCF talk right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, one of the tools that helps make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly Open Phone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before. It's just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table, whether every customer conversation counts. You need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer. So no more carrying 2 phones or relying on a landline. Their built-in AI agent is a game changer, and it can answer after-hours calls, capture leads, and keep the business moving even when you're off the clock. It works for you. So see why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone. Get started for free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. And if you got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put it down for $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I don't know if you watched Sunday Night Football, if you stayed up late last night, but a tie in the NFL, that just shows that why college football overtime rules are so much better. If you had that on your card, congratulations in FanDuel. But even though if you didn't, you could have had a chance to play a same game parlay or live bets on that Sunday night game, or you got the doubleheader for Monday Night Football tonight in the NFL. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast, your team every day. Let's dive into Pro Football Focus and talk about the top performers as we finish up today's episode. I'm going to give the top 5 offensive performers, top 5 defensive performers. We'll dive into it a little bit. We're not going to talk about any of the downsides. I don't think we're going to get into any of the heavy criticism on this segment today, because like Chris Klieman said, and I think we should follow suit, we should celebrate this win. We're going to criticize this team a little bit, probably during the week, as we can nitpick them and how they line up against the Baylor Bears. So I think for this segment, I think we should remain positive. On the offensive side of it, you had the top 5 offensive grades ranging from 89.1 all the way down to 66.6. And it was pretty good. I thought they overall played really good football. Now, Will Swanson led the charge. He only had 17 snaps in this one, but he had an 89.1 offensive grade. And what really popped out to me was an 81.7 run blocking grade. Will Swanson had a really good game. Chris Klieman even joked about it, where he almost, quote, killed himself after celebrating a good block from Swanee on this one. He really stepped up and proved that he is one of the top tight ends in the Big 12. This group, this entire tight end group, proved that they belong to be one of the best ones. And we finally got some tight end love from Avery Johnson and the rest of the tight ends. 2 red zone touchdowns from the tight ends. Bring it back to what worked last year, leading the entire country with 13 of them red zone touchdowns to tight ends. Sam Heck leads the charge as number 2 on the offensive grades and the top offensive lineman for the week. He played all 72 offensive snaps. And for the record, how about that, folks? 72 offensive snaps. That might be the most snaps on the offense so far this season. Putting it into perspective, against Arizona last week, only 53. The ratio was 83 offensive snaps to 53. So this week you get 72. That just shows a lot more. You got your defense off the field and your offense made a lot more progress. But a 77.4 offensive grade for Sam Heck, 83.1 on the pass blocking, and 71.9 on the run blocking. Good stuff on that run side. The run blocking side is definitely what I'm focusing on, because that was a huge concern heading into the week so far this entire season. And this offensive line really stepped up, including Sam Heck, who is easily one of the most underrated centers in the entire country. Avery Johnson comes in third with a 74.8 offensive grade. We saw him run the ball a lot more. He had himself some nice runs as well, and he comes in at number 3. We already talked about him early in the segment. The spark that he brought was absolutely exciting. I'm not going to count him as a top 5 in this one because he only got 5 snaps. I feel like you should probably put up a 10% or even a 10 snap minimum when you're talking top 5 grades. But Blake Barnett comes in at number 4 with a 74.3 offensive grade on this one, according to PFF, with only his 5 snaps. We didn't get a chance to talk about him with the spark in the first segment, but I think you absolutely need to include him in that conversation. Putting him in the backfield, I think, not only lit a spark for the entire offense, but dare I say, potentially lit a spark for Avery Johnson, showing that, hey, we are going to have this quarterback run the football. We need you to do the same thing. So I think there was a kind of maybe a little double of a push to that narrative of Blake Barnett, and he did a great job. And maybe we found our answer to quarterback 2, and maybe we saw the future of Kansas State in this one, week 5 against UCF. Dylan Edwards and Jerron Tibbs round out the top 5 for the offensive grades. Dylan Edwards coming in with a 67 overall offensive grade. I mean, I think that number is pretty low personally compared to what he actually did. I'm guessing it's because his run block grade was a 58.7 and his passing grade was a 54.1. But when you're looking at what he did as an actual runner, Dylan Edwards stepped up and did exactly what he needed to do. And he lit that spark and he got that win for Kansas State. Jerron Tibbs, 66.6, rounds it out for the offense for Kansas State. And I need to shout him out because on that huge 75-yard rush by Dylan Edwards, Jerron Tibbs made a huge block. He's becoming one of the best wide receiver blockers in the Big 12, and he deserves his flowers on that one. Let's quickly round out the defense here. The numbers are a lot nicer on the defensive side compared to the offense. It ranged from 88.1 to 74.2. I'm going to give all 5 of them in order since the time's going long, and then we'll talk about all of them in as we wrap up this show. Austin Romaine leads the charge. How about that? 88.1 defensive grade. Gunnar Maldonado, no surprise there after the game he had. 83.7, 77.6 for number 3, VJ Payne. Quay Moss, 76.7 at number 4. And Travis Bates comes in the top 5 at 74.2. You're seeing most of this in the middle 3, 2, 3, and 4 coming with the secondary. That's a great feeling to have when you're about to play Baylor. Your secondary stepping up, really good things from that. I think the only downside that I saw was VJ Payne and Gunnar Maldonado had dropped interceptions. Gunnar should have had 2. VJ Payne should have had 1. But other than that, they played some great football. And how about Austin Romaine, folks? We kind of called him out this week. We kind of said we need to make sure he leads this defense and proves that this defense is one of the best in the Big 12. And I think he led the charge here. I think he got the message loud and clear, got himself an 88.1 defensive grade, great in the rush defense, great in coverage. He had 4 tackles according to PFF. He did have 1 missed tackle, but still good enough for an 88.1 defensive grade. That is All-American type stuff. That is easily all Big 12 type stuff. And if he continues that for the rest of the season, he, like many others on this Kansas State team, are going to fastly, quickly, whatever word you want to use, forget about how this season started. So it's all about Baylor now. We're going to head into the Baylor week. We're going to talk with Chris Klieman on Monday. We're going to get his thoughts and discuss it on Tuesday's show. Also got a good basketball stuff coming out for you on Tuesday as well. Sat down with Andy Patton of Locked On College Basketball. We'll have you this on that channel as well. So a double feature on Tuesday right here on Locked On Kansas State. But until then, please like the video. Please subscribe. Drop a comment wherever you're listening. You can find me on Twitter at Locked On K-State or my personal Twitter at Christian S. Rauh. If you're looking for articles or more coverage, I've launched a website called Blueprint Sports Network. You can check that out as well, where we're talking about Kansas State, the Big 12, all that other stuff, college football, you name it. We'll be doing that as well. But please like the video, please subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.